Hey, everybody, it's Pete. I'm back again. Just wanted to let you guys know that this is a pre-recorded episode. This one goes to season 9. I see a bunch of requests on here for us to cover season 8 to 10. Well, Charles and Larry weren't there those years, but Gretchen and Aaron were, and we have done a couple of those in our Patreon. And since we're not live this week, we decided to release 2 episodes. This one is You Say Goodbye, I Say Hello, which is when Dylan comes back in season 9. Again, we'll be back live next week, July 7th, as we cover Castles in the Sand with Brooke. I think it's going to be a blast. All right, enjoy this pre-recorded episode, and we will see you back live next week.
Hey, Beverly Hills 90210 fans! Are you ready to dive deep, episode by episode, storyline by storyline, character by character, as we break down the making of your favorite zip code with your host, Pete Ferrero, like so many special guests, and all your questions, live on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. Oh, yeah.
Hey, we are here on the Beverly Hills 90210 show. I'm super excited about this particular episode. We've been covering Thanksgiving, years past, and I thought, well, we can't not do this one. We have to talk about the season 9 one too, because it's an important part of the history of the show. I right off the bat to tell you guys, Gretchen and Aaron, I love the seasons 9 and 10, and I love all the writing and all the work that you did in those 2 seasons. It's incredible stuff, and I love what's in a lot of what's in this episode. So anyway, how was Thanksgiving for both of you? Gretchen, how's everything going?
Great. I had a very socially distant and safe Thanksgiving, but I ordered in some, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I ordered in some specialty food from there, and it was delicious. And so it was nice. It was very nice. Lots of TV watching.
For sure. Goldbelly, is that where you
got?
I
did it through Goldbelly. Exactly. I love it. I'm addicted. And I went to a place called Primanti Brothers, and I was able to get their hometown special sandwich, and it was delicious. So.
Oh, I have had it. I've been to Pittsburgh. I've seen a Pirates game, and I have had it because I think it's in the stadium. I think they have those.
Yeah, they have one in the stadium. That's correct. Yeah. So done you. You hit the right places. That stadium's gorgeous. Good job. Yeah.
It's exciting, and Goldbelly is awesome. Aaron, how about you? How is Thanksgiving?
Completely relaxed. My mom had actually come out about just over a week ago from Iowa. So we all got our noses swabbed and, stuck her out in the back house for a little while and just had and then put her to work cooking. So we had just a 3-person Thanksgiving. It was really nice.
Good plan. Yeah.
Very sweet. And then of course, the director of this episode, Michael Lange, is here too. Michael, how was Thanksgiving for you?
We had a nice Thanksgiving. My middle daughter, who was here in LA, came over, and we had an outdoor lunch Thanksgiving. So, however, it was my wife, actually, who's always right, said it's going to be kind of chilly out there. It was 68 degrees. I made fun of her, saying that would not be chilly, but it was kind of chilly just to sit out. Plus, there was a huge amount of wind. So luckily we had Thai food, the traditional Thai Thanksgiving, instead of turkey, so that they didn't fly away in the wind.
Right.
It doesn't have wings.
Yeah.
So we had a good time.
That's great. I think it's, let's get into this. I love this episode, as I said. I think it's important that for fans who aren't familiar with the two of you to kind of talk about how, and then we talked about this a little bit when we had Lindsay on, but how you guys kind of Gretchen and Aaron got into the writing of 90210. Give us a little backstory on how you guys came into that world. Gretchen, we'll start with you.
Well, Aaron and I had been assistants at the time in different places, and we were getting up early in the morning and writing and trying to put all our stuff together and get ready to go. And we were had just signed with an agency called Broder at the time, and they submitted us over to 90210, and we were submitted in a couple places, but luckily Lori McCarthy over a weekend picked up our stuff, and we had done an Ally McBeal spec that was a little controversial at the time because it was about Georgia getting an abortion. And a lot of people didn't like it, but Lori saw something. Lori, to me, is one of the best. She's the most talented television writer I've ever worked with. She can tell stories and go places that make so much sense, but like you just are so surprised by and so entertained by it. And she responded to it. And as the story goes, she took it to John Eisendrath and said, look, I like these guys. We're looking for staff writers. And what we heard was John Eisendrath said, I guess we can hire them. And if they don't work out, we'll fire them.
Lovely. Yeah.
We showed up like with total stars in our eyes. I remember when Aaron and I were driving and we're like, maybe they'll give us our own little cubby to share, as a little cubicle to like, that would be our little area in our space, like our own professional writing space. And Mr. Spelling, who is so like generous with the writers, we had our own offices. We had parking spots. Like it was crazy. And they were so welcoming. The staff was so welcoming and it was so wonderful. So that's kind of how we ended up there.
Aaron, is that how you remember it too? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having to give notice, 3 days notice at a job I had worked for 3 years. And literally we went from, answering phones to, being in a writer's room with, John Eisendrath, who's also just a fantastic mentor and an amazing writer and showrunner, and a really, really great staff. I mean, but it was crazy. I mean, I grew up in Indiana, split my life between Indiana and Florida. But when I was a young kid in Indiana, there were no other Aarons. I didn't know any. And the only one I knew produced these TV shows that I loved. So I always, seized on seeing Aaron Spelling's name at the end of the credits. And it was fun when we got to meet him in person because he was very active in the show. He was very hands-on with 90210 to the end. I just remember meeting him and him saying, there's only room for one Aaron in this town. And that was like, that was it. That was like the dream come true. So it was a really fun time.
Now, you were both fans of 90210, yeah?
I certainly lived in the United States of America and was aware of it and saw it every once in a while. But when I was growing up, in my household, I was allowed 2 hours of television a week. So I had some crazy homework to do in those 3 days before we started there. Aaron, on the other hand,
I watched it religiously. Yeah. It was crazy to have been someone who watched it as a high school student, and then that a show would be on so long that then I could have ended up writing for it. I let it sort of lapse in the college years a little bit just because I didn't have a TV in college, but I watched all the high school stuff. And then as it, coming back around, moving to LA and stuff, I probably watched, like seasons, 7 and 8. But it was an amazing thing to get to write for it because it was just it was one of my favorite shows growing up.
And you get to do this particular episode. There's a lot of fun, and the one that follows this, there's a lot of fun callbacks, to old school 90210, going to the school and all that stuff. So, but so at the beginning of this season 9, Jason Priestley leaves the show. Were you in the mix of any of that? Did you know that was a thing that was happening? How
That had been, I think it had been decided that Jason wasn't going to be sticking around. I mean, I think it was very clear what episode he was leaving. I feel like he stayed through episode 4 or something like that, maybe. And I think at the time as well, it was known that Tiffany was going to be getting ready to go too. I don't think when we signed on that Luke had committed when that season began. I don't think so. Yeah. I seem to recall, John having to jump out of the room and negotiations and, whispers of whether or not Luke would be doing it and what, in what capacity. And I think that came together, pretty quickly. I mean, I think I kind of remember working on the script and honestly, we didn't know if he would end up coming in at the end of that episode or the beginning of next. That was sort of, I think, a little bit loosey-goosey at the time.
Gretchen, how do you remember that? Yeah, same?
Yeah, same. I think we were, in the very beginning, we did know that Jason was leaving. And I think Aaron and I were just so happy to be there that we were just absorbing everything that was going on. And I remember the Jason exit was really like everybody had been there for so long, and it was all happening on very high levels, and who was handling it as far as writing and everything else, which makes total sense because he'd been there the longest time. And from the beginning, obviously, because the show started about him. So I remember like there were rumors that Luke was coming back, and Aaron and I had been assigned episode 7 because in the room they start sort of saying, okay, you're gonna do this one, this one, this one, this one. And all of this stuff just started hitting in episode 7. And so by the time like it was finally determined that Luke was coming back in episode 2, and this is the first episode of television we've written professionally, it was mind-blowing and so exciting. It was like winning the lottery, but then going back to work the next day and winning the lottery again, and then winning the lottery again and again and again. It was great.
Right. It must be like, you're like, okay, so we got to see that episode 7. Who knows what that's going to be? Wait a minute.
I mean, normally
leaving. This is where we're debuting Gina Kincaid.
Yes.
This is the one where Luke is coming back. You know, it's like it must have just been.
It was crazy. And then Michael Lange was directing it.
Right.
So it was super, super exciting because we actually were a big fan of his. We were a huge fan of his work. His episodes are always really fun.
They are. Awesome.
Yeah.
Michael, do you remember coming and getting a call about this episode and that Luke is coming back and they're bringing bringing everybody back to direct this? Do you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah. I think they usually booked me at the beginning of the season. I usually got booked for all my shows. But when I found out that this was the one where Luke was probably coming back, it was very exciting because, you know, as me and the rest of the world were huge fans of Luke Perry.
Yeah.
So I actually have there's only room for one Aaron in the world. It has nothing to do with this episode, but it does have to do with Aaron, Mr. Aaron. I had a child. My third child was born a few days after I finished shooting a pilot for them for spelling, and his name was going to be Adam. So, and you know, Aaron asked about how it was going, and he was really sweet about the whole thing. So now I go in, I finish shooting, I do my cut, I go in to present my cut to him, and he sent this unbelievable gift. You know, it was a sterling this and a mink that, and it was like ridiculous. And so I get in and I'm sitting with him, and he said, "Oh, before we get started, how's little Aaron Lange doing?" So I said, no, it's stupid. You know, I said, "Oh, it's Adam." And he said, without missing a beat, he said, "Beth, cancel that $100,000 check to Aaron Lange."
Oh, that's awesome.
That's fantastic. Oh my God.
The most prolific television producer at the time, and possibly ever, he still remembered those kind of little things. It was, you know, it was pretty wild.
That's awesome.
Him, to me, it was big.
Huge, yeah. Where it seems
now,
like he was
now
always
Adam is about to go off.
Seems like he was very personable, and everybody sort of has those stories about Aaron and meeting Aaron, and it's always such a big deal. And I've heard that quite a bit over the time I've been doing the show. So very awesome to hear that. So when you now know that Dylan is coming back, there's a couple of elements that you can play with, right? There's the fact that they left this open-ended thing about Dylan's dad for you guys. And they also, then you could play with the fact that, you know, Tony had died and we never really got, there's a couple of unresolved Dylan elements. And I mean, Aaron, I guess you're a fan, so you knew those things, right? Did you, what were some of the conversations about, well, Dylan's coming back, what do we want to do? What were some of those early conversations like?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely knew that we had things. We knew that we had story. I mean, fortunately, like, you know, Aaron Spelling would always say, like, don't ever kill a character off, because you can always bring them back. I mean, that was just one of those things where you just don't ever be definitive about whether or not someone's dead. And it, you know, certainly paid off because we managed to get a lot of story out of his father. And then, of course, we took him down the heroin path. So that was another thing that we knew we were tracking. You know, we were tracking through from there. You know, the show was we did it so quickly. I mean, it was just, you know, in terms of production, I mean, it just, for as good and as polished as it looks, it was unbelievable how quickly it was done. And the writers too, we didn't have a ton of time. I mean, we were doing, I think that season we may have done 24 or 26 episodes. I can't remember, maybe 24. And that was, and Michael, I don't remember how many days you had to shoot your episodes. I mean, it wasn't a gigantic amount of time. Were they?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's really.
And I think first hours.
What was that say? 7? You said 7?
I think yeah, 7 days. And we were supposed to keep it no longer than 10 to 12 hours. That's it.
Right.
Wow.
No overtime. Right.
Oh
right.
yeah. I mean, if we went 12 hours on that show, I mean, there was, it just didn't happen. And so, and I say that just because the writing staff too, it was just like running like Indiana Jones, and that boulder is behind us in terms of, because they shot the show so quickly, they needed more material. And when you worked at Spelling, a director had a script days before prep. I mean, now when you work on a show, a director is lucky if they get a script the last day of prep, which is inexcusable when it comes to treating TV as a business, as something that runs on budgets and things like that. So at the time, we were moving so quickly that I know we had a couple of ideas in place just in terms of Luke, in terms of Dylan's backstory that we knew we could go to. But that was also the idea of bringing in Gina.
Mm-hmm.
So we had sort of a new thing to chart. And then also having Matt, Daniel Cosgrove's character, enter as well. And, what I had forgotten, I always knew this about Danny, but I mean, Danny, like, wow, did he come alive and shine in that episode? I mean, we loved him from day one. The whole writing staff did. And I think the cast really did as well. The nicest guy and super talented. But that too, his performance in that episode was terrific, because all of a sudden when Luke walks in the door, you're like, okay, I'm seeing a triangle right away.
Right.
And I think that, more than sort of leaning into what happened in the past with that character, I think John and Laurie were eager to push it forward into the present in terms of setting the chessboard up that way.
Yeah, that's definitely coming across, and I love that. Do you feel, I asked you about Jason leaving or Brandon leaving. Do you feel like Matt is some people have said that they think that Matt is a Brandon replacement. And I don't feel that Matt is a Brandon replacement. I feel like there are elements of Matt that are Brandon-esque maybe, but for the most part, he becomes his own character, especially in this episode. You start to see Matt become, he's not a successful lawyer, right? He's
right.
broke. There's
right.
a lot of elements to his character that are definitely way different, where Brandon is sort of built on success and doing the right thing. Matt is the total opposite of that. So I think if fans were looking for that out of Matt, they weren't going to get it. So talk to me about Matt, actually. Gretchen, was that an important element that we didn't want him to be Brandon too?
Yeah, I think exactly. Because I feel like Danny did with the character, and also what we were trying to do was bring something new into the show that wasn't there before, because very few shows have as many main cast members who carry story than I think 90210, the first classic Beverly Hills 90210. And that means you churn through stories. And that means that like so many things have already been done. And that's why we never left the writer's room. And I think to bring, you wouldn't want to repeat a character anyway, just because you want a new point of view. And what I love about what Danny did with it is he didn't use the sort of newness to the group or the different background or experience as any kind of weakness. It was almost like what his strength that he leaned into, the character leaned into, but I also felt like I never felt like Daniel was trying to play anything other than Matt, if that makes sense. Like he very much came in, was his own character, his own person. He had a different almost tempo. He even had to seem to have every once in a while you can hear almost like a New Yorkie accent or something going on with him. And so no one else really had that. And that was really exciting for us. And I think, at the end of the day, let's be honest, here's the secret. It's a soap opera. Who's going to probably at the end of the day end up with who are going to be together and who's going to get married at Merv Griffin's hotel and who's going to whatever. But, you got to like make sure that people were along for the journey. And I really felt like he always was there. Exactly. He never sort of like pretended to be anything he wasn't as a character, as in the actor. And it made him very winning and wholesome and interesting. And so, yeah, like you're right. I mean, I think the fact that like that character smoked and they did certain, like there were things that we didn't really, it was just different. And also, I think, I don't know, I never talked to Jenny Garth about this, but she was able to react to him in a totally different way. Like he was a totally different element to the story. So yeah, no, he was a great success for the show, I feel like.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, he gave it much like Janet did. Gave it stability at a time when there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of people coming and going, and you needed Matt to be there, and also Noah. We'll talk about Noah too. Aaron, what is your thoughts on the whole thing with what I was just talking about with Matt and Brandon and the comparison?
Well, I think the thing that was nice about all of the new blood that got added to the show was that, the thing that was incredible watching the latest version of 90210 when the cast came back is just like what, people don't think that, some people might think, oh, the actors were their characters. It's so not true. Because like watching Jenny step back into the part of Kelly, even in the couple of different iterations, that have happened where she played the character again. So they were so consistent. The actors were so consistent. They knew exactly who they were. They'd been on the show for so long. They knew what lane the character was in. And Mr. Spelling also very much kept them in their lanes. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were times when you try to do something for, I wish I had this script page. I wish I had saved it, where we had done something for Donna, a line or two, and he used to do notes on our scripts. And then you get the script back in his handwriting. And there was something, it was like, you're making Donna a slut. Underlined, 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 underlined. So
and
like,
we weren't supposed to do that.
No.
Yeah.
So,
probably
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure whatever Donna did wasn't that bad, but it certainly didn't go over well. So, the long and the short of it is that those characters had a definite lane, the original characters, and so adding these new people in, it brought a whole different energy because they weren't set in stone yet, and Brandon got pretty sanctimonious toward the end of he was always built on that. That character took himself so seriously.
Yeah.
And I think what's cool about what Danny did with Matt is this was a guy who didn't care if he looked like an idiot. He did it in such a charming way. And Lindsay as well. Like they just didn't,
so funny.
They took the work seriously and their characters seriously, but they allowed themselves to kind of show up warts and all. And that was what I think was so refreshing. And I think that's why there's scenes with when Danny's with Jenny or when Lindsay's with Ian, and even when Vanessa would act with Luke, it was nice to just have this an actor come in who you didn't know what you were going to get. And then, of course, you could pivot back to a Kelly and Dylan scene and feel that same energy that they had when they were in high school.
Yeah.
So with Matt, I don't think he was a replacement for Brandon at all, because that character ended up having secrets. He ended up lying. He often made bad choices. So Brandon just didn't do that as much at the end.
Yeah,
and throughout.
Yeah, I mean, and even the fact that Matt is just a small thing, but Matt is dancing. That's a thing that Brandon doesn't do. We all know that Brandon.
Never.
Yeah. So immediately we're seeing something totally different out of Matt. Michael, I'm curious for you. You've directed the original cast in various different ways. What is it like as you see this shifting and new characters coming in, some of the ones that how to easily direct? You've worked with Jason for so long. What is that like for you as a director?
I think it's similar to writing new characters. It's unexplored territory, so you can have a little more freedom to try stuff out. Although, again, you definitely hear from Aaron, not this Aaron, the Aaron.
The only Aaron.
he had sunglasses, that was a no-no, no matter who the character was.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was fun to try out as the new characters were sort of finding their way. That was an element that was really fun to explore and play with, within a pretty tight amount of time, though. On 90210, you didn't have a lot of time to experiment. You just had to keep shooting.
And what about directing Daniel as Matt? What was he like to direct?
He was a joy, total joy. Actually, you know what? All of those actors were a joy. They all, as Aaron was saying, they all knew who they were. They knew who their characters were. They were very prepared. I mean, because on that show, and I so often wish that more shows were like this, there were consequences if you were not prepared. And the consequences were you had to go see Mr. Spelling. And no one ever wanted to go see Mr. Spelling, because that would not be a fun meeting. And so, basically everyone was very professional and always prepared. But again, with Daniel, he was just such a nice guy anyway. And just fun to work with, and responded really well to suggestions, and also extremely prepared, and he really wanted to do well it was relatively new for him, so it was great. It was great.
We touched on Valerie or Tiffany Leaving, and the same comparison comes up sometimes with Gina being the bad girl. We're going to lose Valerie, who's a great foil for Kelly. There's always that conflict between the two of them. Was that conscious to bring in? We need that element to the show, and we're losing Tiffany, so Gina's going to have similar aspects to her, but only in a Gina way.
Right. No, it does sound like really maybe formulaic and strategic, but at the end of the day, you do want something like that represented, that sort of energy. And I had forgotten this, to be honest, but I think with Valerie, you got the feeling that she was a bad girl, but it took a lot longer to understand who she was and why, because it was a soap opera. So it took it took its time. We set up Gina's damage and why she is the way she is in that first episode so quickly that I was like, whoa, I get her. You know what I mean? Like, and the fact that the person she is always looking at and comparing herself to is Donna was also a different element too, in that, she talks about coming from the other side of the tracks. She talks about getting the hand-me-downs. I think it's in the next episode even, or maybe it was this episode, maybe it's the next episode. But she just, right away, you understand growing up how her mother had an attitude towards her sister, Donna's mom, and how she had an attitude towards her cousin Donna growing up. And you just get that character right away. And you don't necessarily forgive her, but you're set up to understand what her issue is. And in a weird, sometimes it's fun to hold things back, but in a weird way, you were set up to be like, oh, show me what you're going to do now. This is going to get really juicy. And Vanessa was awesome at that. She did a great job. So yeah, I think she did bring us a kind of energy, or just like when you're putting together a cocktail party or a basketball team or a football team, you're very much making sure everything is covered. But you remember the individual players for what they bring to the party. And I think she did bring something really different. I can't see Gina tossing that turkey out the back door the way that Tiffany did it with Valerie. Yeah. You know what I mean? So which is hysterical. So,
I'd forgotten we had to fight so hard to have that moment. Had to fight so hard to get that to stay in the script.
Well, I mean, holidays are super, one thing I've learned in this past week of doing these Thanksgivings, holiday episodes are important to the Spelling sort of a makeup. They're always going to be one. Did you know, well, I don't know if you knew that this was going to be the Thanksgiving episode. Maybe you did calendar wise. Did you know how important that was? Yeah.
We did know. I mean, because it was, again, such a different time. I mean, that show was on in its time slot on that day, and clockwork. I mean,
no uncertainty. Yeah.
that just doesn't happen anymore. And we knew exactly when our air dates were. So we were crafting all of the holidays in advance. And yeah, Aaron Spelling loved a holiday episode as a spine for a show. I mean, he definitely knew what worked well when it came to that sort of stuff. And so we always did that.
And I think for first time writers like us, it was so nice to have that thing to be writing to, or that sort of just knowing the theme, or knowing that we're going to build to this one special event that's so familiar to everybody, and we're going to do our own new twist on it in this season of this episode of television. But I think it was nice for us too to be able to go to our first television episode written together for a major network, having that sort of like, okay, we're doing a Thanksgiving episode, so we at least know there'll be, a gathering of friends, a toast, a turkey, and some tears and some laughter.
I think it's so significant to talk about Tiffany leaving, because when Brenda left, Tiffany gives this show a whole new life and energy, and almost in some ways saves the show. I mean, it could be argued. And so when we're going to lose, or this character is going to leave, that must be very tough for you guys as writers and for the directors, because it's someone that can deliver and go to in a different way than Jason.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that aspect like for you guys when you know that Tiffany is leaving the show, Gretchen?
I personally was crushed that we were only going to write one episode for her, because we were fans. And I think Tiffany is a television star in a way that, like, everybody on that show is a television star. They cast a show of television stars, but she has an effortlessness to her. And I think maybe it gets to also, you get to do it when you get to be this sort of like the spunky bad girl, but she plays it so beautifully, and she's so much fun, and she got so much life. So yeah, no, I mean, we were really excited to get to work with her for that episode, or write for her for that episode. But we were like, oh, well, we wish she was sticking around for a little more, because this would have been really, really fun. But we got the one. This was good.
How about you, Aaron? Watching her leave, you were a super fan, so the significance of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we knew what we were losing for sure. I mean, we didn't get to write for Tiffany a lot, but in the writers' room breaking stories for Valerie, we knew what we were losing. I mean, again, that character had gone through a ton of stuff, even early on in that season. It was shocking, like, how much stuff that character went through. And then, of course, like, my jaw dropped in that scene where David's like, well, Kelly, her father molested her and didn't stop until she killed him. It's like, Kelly's like, oh, all right. Like, I mean, the ability, like, we just kept, that train never stopped rolling. So, so we had done a lot with her, with that character. And she was going to be greatly missed, and she was friendly, obviously, like, she and Jenny and Tori, they were all really close friends. And so there was that idea too, that a friend was leaving the show for the cast. I mean, everybody loved Tiffany. It was, I think what was interesting was, in the same way that Danny Cosgrove was not Brandon, Vanessa Marcel was not Tiffany Amber Thiessen. And so I think for the writers, there might have been an impulse to be like, let's throw her what we would throw Tiffany. Mm-hmm. In starting out of the gate, let's give her these cutting one-liners. Let's give her some of this stuff that might have been more appropriate for Valerie. And to Vanessa's credit, she went the other way with that stuff. She found her own way to play that part. And it's interesting because sometimes we would learn with Vanessa. And again, like I looking back on it now, she was clearly making choices to make this character a three-dimensional person. Yeah. And sometimes she would take a joke and she would sell it in a different way. And watching the performances now, you go back and you look at it and you're like, wow, that was interesting what she did. And it was interesting that she didn't descend into a Tiffany Amber Thiessen impersonation. Yeah. And I think that's why ultimately, she was brought in through the lens of here's how she's different. We're going to have her hate Donna. You know, we're going to have her going up against Donna. Whereas it was Valerie and Kelly, you know, this is going to be, she's solely oriented toward making Donna's life hell. Well, that ended up, I think it was interesting that she quickly moved off of Noah and pivoted to Luke, because Gina's character turned into a complete psychosexual mess. I mean, the depth of her, like, disturbed self-esteem issues. I mean, like, the stuff that we ended up doing for her, I think it was also just in a reaction to being like, okay, you know, putting on a Valerie hat onto this actor, into this character, isn't what we need to do. Like, she needs to go down a much darker path, and she should do it with Luke Perry. She should do it with Dylan.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that just happens when you're introducing new people. Like, we didn't know, none of us knew Vanessa. I mean, we knew her from her feature career, and we knew, and she came on and she was ready to play and she was game. Talk about someone who was always prepared. But it took a little while to kind of figure out how to use her best.
For sure. Let's talk about Noah. And I want to ask Michael. Michael, you always get the accidents and these crazy, you know, things that are happening. Noah's character has this drunk driving accident. Do you remember shooting that out with Vincent?
I actually did not remember it until I reviewed the episode the other day, and then I saw, it's the spelling way of doing a hit and run, where you just see the Jeep drive off out of frame and then do the sound effect. So you don't need a stunt man, you don't need anything. It's the sound effect, it totally worked.
Yeah, it works.
That's because, you know, it was until much later in the episode, you know, you didn't find out it wasn't him, you know, or, you know, so that was kind of cool. But, you know, again, I mean, not to sound repetitive, but Noah was great also. You know, I realized I shot Tiffany's first episode and her last.
Yes.
And I also shot Shannon Doan's last episode.
Yeah.
So I'm the character killer.
No, you're the bookends, man. You're solid.
Did you do the one where she pulls the joint, out of the little hidey hole at the Walsh house?
Yep.
Oh my God, classic.
Yeah. Well, what do you, Michael? What is your thoughts on Tiffany? I don't know that I asked you that, but what was your thoughts on watching that character leave? You shot her last scenes with Brian, which I thought was also very appropriate, that Brian is the one that walks her away, because they've had so much significance there. What was it like shooting out those scenes with Tiffany?
You know, again, I mean, I really, really liked working with her, and her character was just so much fun. So it was sad, you know, it was sad knowing that I wasn't going to work with her on that show again. So, and then also it was a little bit of a big deal because we actually had to go on location to shoot her driving away in the taxi cab. So that was always a big deal on a special show, going to location.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Wall. Was that the Walsh house that you shot that at? Yeah.
In Pasadena, or it might be.
It's Altadena. Yeah.
There's such a thing as Pasadena.
Yeah.
Altadena. That's right, Altadena.
Yeah,
but,
I know, because I live 2 minutes from. I live in Altadena, and I live only a few minutes away from that house. Yeah.
Coincidence, Peter?
Love it.
It felt like home. This area.
Another funny location. There was another kind of fun location thing that happened on that episode, very unusual, which is I don't know. You remember the scene on the Santa Monica Pier? So we originally were, you know, we were not going to go to the Santa Monica Pier. That would be, you know, prohibitive in every way. So we found this little sort of, it's a little mini mall on Ventura Boulevard near Woodley, and they had a little carousel. We said, oh, this will be perfect. No one will ever know. Well, we shoot it, and sure enough, someone did know. Aaron. Not this Aaron, the other. He knew. He said that was supposed to be on Santa Monica Pier. And we had to reshoot it, which was a big deal. So, and again, we weren't going to go to Santa Monica Pier, so we built on stage. We built about a 50 or 60 foot section of the Santa Monica Pier.
Wow.
For that scene.
Wow.
And then
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
we didn't-
either.
There were visual effects back then, so we had to shoot it. We didn't have a backing or anything for the ocean or the moon or anything. So I felt it would look very kind of static and unreal. So I had we got a fake seagull and put it on some piano wire and with little wheels behind it so that it actually flew through the back of the frame on the walk and talk down the pier.
No
You see
idea.
the
Wow.
seagull going by, and the script supervisor said, "I don't think seagulls fly at night." So I said, "I don't really care what you think."
They do now.
Let me know if it's right, and don't worry about the seagull at night.
Yeah.
It's a
Wow.
vampire seagull, you fool.
But it was funny when watching it, Michael, because clearly Aaron Spelling was super psyched about this episode because we did more location work than we ever. I was like, wait a second, we went to a grocery
Everywhere.
store. We went to, I mean, this was not done. I mean, and shot at night on location. This stuff
Right.
was not
The
done.
videos,
at
all that stuff. It was amazing.
All of
I
it.
kept going, like, by the way, you don't do that at all anymore unless you're doing a pilot and you have to be on location for everything. It was chock full. That episode, it looked gorgeous. You went
Yeah, no.
everywhere. It was great.
Yeah. And I always love seeing the supermarket, when they do that at the top of the episode. You used it for David running into Valerie, right? And they did we were talking about one from season 6 where they utilized the supermarket too. Everybody went shopping. Do you remember shooting supermarket stuff, Michael? Do you remember being on location to shoot that too?
Oh yeah, yep. And obviously we would have to just find you decide what's the most important location, and then you just find other ones that will work around it. Because again, you're not going to go out. I mean, I think normally that show was probably usually maybe 1 or 2 days out, and then the rest on stage. And this one, I think, was 3 or 4 days out, and we only had a few stage days plus the reshoot, of course, which was humiliating but fun.
The
It looked amazing.
other storyline going on in this is with David.
Watched it though. When I watched it, I was shocked at how many locations there were, because that just didn't happen.
No.
There's this other thing with David and the underage girl, which was shocking to me because I guess
Right.
I don't know if this would play today. I kept thinking about all the things that were written in this over the 2 episodes, the one that comes after this too. What is your thoughts on the David storyline, Gretchen?
Watching it this recently, I watched it like this. Having written it, I watched it like this. I was like, I know we did this story on the show, and even watching it again, it blew my mind. And I think we knew going into it. I remember being happy we were starting the story and not being the ones necessarily who were wrapping up the story, because I mean, we all did it in the room together, but like that was going to be an alley oop. That was that was heavy. That was a very heavy thing.
Yeah, you talk about, I mean, that episode feels like such a time capsule.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone wants to know what life looked like or what we were just talking about or how we handled certain things in the late 90s, a beeper,
Yes.
a video store,
Yes, exactly.
and then a light statutory rape story. I mean, it was sort of like, I mean, much like
and how it impacts the guy who's being accused.
Yeah, and how she's really making his life hell. I mean, I can't believe it. I mean, obviously these conversations were being had back then, but in such a different way from now. This story wouldn't happen this way, and but it was always like a we always picked issues that the characters could get on one side or the other on. And then, I mean, so much of the show in those last 2 seasons, John is really political, really super smart. I don't think we were sort of like, like charging down like this is an issue show, but we often did pick things that were happening, just ripping it from the headlines and stuff. So I have a feeling that this must have been in the water somewhere, you know, in terms of a storyline like this, and what's the gray area. But it's not gray anymore.
I'm curious. Matt is a lawyer. Are you guys coming up with a whole bunch of legal things for the other characters to happen so that Matt has some work? Is that a part of it too?
Yeah.
We were always looking for an engine, you know, anything that could be a plot engine. I mean, I can't believe we got so many stories out of a retail store.
I'm not. What?
but no, that was for sure. I mean, I think as we were thinking about like, what can this new character do? How can this character bring us stories? For sure, that was one of the reasons that he was an attorney. Yeah.
Do you know at all? I mean, this might be before you guys, but do you know where the characters get their names from? Gina Kincaid and Matt Nernan? I don't know the answer. I'm wondering if you guys know where you pull names from. Gina
was named for my aunt. I have an Aunt Gina.
Very
I don't
cool.
know where we got Kincaid. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what happens is you come up with the name that you really want and you submit it, and then they go out into the world. And if people with that name exists, then you can't use it. Then they'll come back to you with like, well, you can't have Smith, but we'll give you 62 other versions. And so you sit there in the writer's room and you go, Gina Jones? No. Gina Kincaid. And like sometimes I think that's how we might have ended up with her last name, to be honest. Or sometimes that happens with other people. But yes, I remember Gina being named after Aaron's aunt.
That's very cool. What about Matt? Do you know where you got Matt Turning from? No.
No. Yeah, that's the name before we got there.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I don't know.
I do remember that we always had to be on doormat watch because we wanted to make sure that he wasn't always getting beaten up by Kelly. In terms of getting kind of, you know, she would often try to mop the floor with that character, so we were always like, don't let him be a doormat.
A couple of things too. You kind of referenced this before, Aaron. In terms of the triangle, you were a fan of the show, so you knew that thematically, Brandon, there's multiple triangles in the history of the show. Is that something that you, first of all, as a fan, that you were like, oh, this will be fun to play the Dylan, Matt, Kelly triangle? And are you consciously doing that, knowing like that's a theme in the 90210 world and universe?
I mean, that was something that was so important to so many people, that you know, Dylan, Brenda, Kelly, you know, triangle, so important. I mean, I would say that when it came to my and Gretchen's kind of contributions on the show, I would say less of it. We were young. I mean, I was 25 when we were really, really young,
and I was
and didn't have as much of that all those romantic entanglements and all of that kind of drama. Oftentimes the person who was just a pro at doing that was Lori. Lori is just like, and John too, like they were just experts at like thread, net, needle. And so a lot of that was us watching, really just watching and learning how to do that and how to, you know, get something going. And just when you think it's going to head down that path, like turn it back around. And so I would say when it came to a lot of the triangle stuff, that was really, a lot of that was accomplished by our bosses.
Mm-hmm. Is that how you remember that too, Gretchen? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, I've said this before, I'll say it a million times after this. It was the best first job any writers could have, because there was such experience and there was such history, and it was it was such a kind place to work too. We didn't get to go to set a lot because, like we were saying before, it was a factory. So like everybody knew exactly what their job was and you know what was required of you, and that's what you did. And then there would be times when, as Aaron, I think we've mentioned this before, we'd be like, we got our work done. Could we drive up into the valley to go to the set? And we would go, and they would be so welcoming and so great. It was a really, really happy place to be. But it was also, and I'm saying boot camp in a way where you just got thrown in with such professionals who had been doing this for so long, but we learned so much just by being amongst all the people there. And it started with Mr. Spelling all the way down. And that cast even was so, even though they were still very young, they were so experienced and so many hours of television under their belt, or in films even. And so we learned a ton. It was the best first job I think we ever could have hoped for. It was fantastic.
Now there's a controversial thing that happens in this episode that people, fans just hold their hat on, in which when Dylan arrives at the house, Steve opens a bottle of champagne and hands Dylan a drink. And this has become, a hot topic because Dylan in the past went through recovery for alcoholism and went to AA and always had a sponsor. We talked a little bit before about David having this, underage relationship and all this. Are you guys aware of Dylan's alcohol, addictions and his problems then? And what do you say to that criticism that, Dylan should definitely not have had a drink and Steve should not have offered it?
Aaron and I were just talking about this actually, because, seeing that happen also, we did know that was the case. And the way we remember it, and please check sources or whatever, is that it was something that Luke felt when he came back. He's like, well, he'd be drinking, or character would be drinking. And I think, and we talked about it in the room, and again, there's times also when you're the staff writers, you hear the topic of conversation, then conversations happen in other rooms and you're not part of them. But I think now looking back in retrospect, it makes total sense why I could see why, the actor, and also from a story point of view, why when we're bringing him back, where he's very much a person who is still on his journey of trying to get over the trauma and the grief and the pain in his life. I understand why he would be leaning on things, again, like crutches, again, that are not good for him, a self-destructive sort of thing. And I also understand bringing a character back not at the end of their journey on certain things. So you can pick them up on the journey again and help watch them go through the struggles to get to the end. So they are more the finished character at the end of the journey of the story. Go ahead.
No. Finish your thought.
No, that's it. That was pretty much it. That was the end of my thought.
I was curious about Michael, what Michael would say, because sometimes too, it's and I hate to reduce it to this, but you might get there and you're blocking the scene and it's suddenly well, we're supposed to do this toast. Oh, but Luke, you shouldn't have, sometimes it literally these things that the audience is tracking and holds so dear. Sometimes people it just slips through the cracks too, which I would hate. I don't want you to think that we just sit there willy-nilly, throwing out things that people hold dear, but sometimes you can come down to the day. That's what I'm curious what Michael has to say about it, because it might have been that Ian had forgotten about Dylan's problem, because by that point too, they were really only tracking themselves and their own storylines. What was interesting about, and I am not throwing the actors under the bus at all, but it's sort of Ian may have it could have even slipped his mind, or he may have had the champagne and the glasses and it wouldn't occur to him to not offer, so there's a lot of weird things. There's a lot of ways that it goes down. I agree with Gretchen that where we took him with the heroin stuff, that I could see him drinking. It is interesting though how Steve ended up handing him that, and but Michael would have been there when it was going down.
Michael, do you remember that?
I don't specifically remember, but knowing, working with Luke, I guarantee you this came up on the day, and I'm sure we talked about it at length. Not at great length, but I'm sure we definitely talked about it. And I have a feeling it probably boiled down to something what Gretchen was saying. He's back and he's still, not finished with his journey. So he doesn't know where it's going to go. And also it was a celebratory time. And I think, a lot of people who have habits like that make excuses for, I'll have this one champagne. It's a special occasion. But I guarantee you that we discussed it, because Luke was that kind of an actor that he would not have forgotten, obviously. I think
no.
Very Ian did forget, but Luke would definitely not have forgotten. So it was
he had an opinion for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I agree with you, Michael, 100%.
Okay. One thing you guys did get right in the next episode, and I'm not saying that you got that wrong. I actually think Gretchen nailed what you said right, because I feel like with those types of characters, I do feel like you're tracking them on the journey, and I think that's a very fair answer to that comment. But I do love in the next episode the dialogue between Kelly and Dylan, where there's this mystery of why is Dylan back in Beverly Hills 90210, and I loved that it became a very simple. I miss my friends. This is my home. This is where I belong. And I love the dialogue that you two wrote between the two of them on the beach and whatnot. Do you remember writing, or I don't know if you guys wrote that dialogue?
We didn't.
I don't think we did.
John wrote that. John Eisendrath wrote that episode. So I'm going to obviously, and by the way, as again, junior writers, a lot of times you'll see our names and John Eisendrath would have written some of the dialogue in our episode because he's the sound writer, and Lori too, and anybody above us, but which is just the way television works. But I really like that too, going back and watching that episode, because everybody wants to know, right? It's the question. It's the name of the episode. And he kind of gives them like a very like, Dylan's very much like a cat. He's going to give you this much, and he's not going to like climb on your lap right away or ever at all, really, maybe. And I love that. But at the very end, it's in a very private moment between Kelly and Dylan that he says, I miss my friends and I missed you. And I think, it was so satisfying. It was so simple, but it was such a satisfying answer to that.
Yeah.
Especially for that show. Especially for this show.
That was well needed. Aaron, how about for you as a fan of the show, watching back the scenes with Dylan and Kelly?
I love those two together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I always did. I was always, I loved them. I love Jenny. And I love Luke, and seeing it again, I miss him so much.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a relationship that went after the show in the way that Luke had a lot of relationships with everybody, in the sense that he was so warm and he could just drop back into your life for like an hour and exit, and your whole day was like so much better. But they were amazing scene partners, and they knew what they were doing so well. And that's the kind of stuff that, that's just the genius of the casting process for those two characters, because you put them in a frame and like they were just great. They were always great.
I want to ask you too, and I'd want to ask you guys about Luke and your experiences working with him. But there's also a line when Dylan comes to the door and he says, someone says, "Where's Brenda?" And he says, "I don't know, ask her." Like, I'm not here with Brenda. That's long over. But do you feel a responsibility at that time to have to write things in like that? Because fans know the last time we heard about Dylan, he was in London with Brenda.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that is the thing about the 90210 fans. Like you said, they're tracking everything. So the moment an audience in their mind stops paying attention to a scene because they're thinking, but where's Brenda? Where's Brenda? Like, he has to mention, he's got to say where Brenda is. Like, what's going, you have to address it. And there was a lot in that very last scene. Michael, I know that all directors love shooting in a foyer with 27 people. It's so much fun, I know. But I remember, because it was our first episode of television, and like we were a little more like, I was a little more like type A about like, well, we make sure we cover this, and I'm sure we're missing a billion things, but like, make sure we cover this. I remember being really agitated because we weren't taking the moment to introduce Dylan to half the people in the room he hasn't met yet, even though it's the last 2 minutes of the show, which no one cares. They just want to see the people who we know each other. Sort of like, but you have to make choices, especially in the last scene, because everybody has an internal clock. Usually when they're watching television, they know the show's almost over. So they start getting also a little like anxious, like, well, you need to cover this and you need to cover that. And I think that was something that needed to be referred to or covered. Yeah. Where was Brenda? Yeah.
I'd like to look up the script. I have the script somewhere. I have to find it, but I'd love to look up the script, because that line seems like an improv from Luke. Why, I don't know. Why don't you ask her? Like, I'd be curious to see if that was even in the script.
Yeah,
I'm sure that I don't know, because that is so Luke. Like, so I don't know. We'll have to do a little digging and see if there was another line written or not.
It is very interesting too, because I mean, you're Aaron, you're a fan of the show. You're both all fans of the show, whatever. But you have to know that there's a diehard Brenda contingency that is constantly asking for Brenda. You know what I mean? This podcast, they're constantly asking for Shannon to come on. I'd love to have her on, obviously, but there's just things that happen that are just not going to make things happen like that. Did you find that too, where in the process of that, you've got to have Brenda? Will you bring Brenda? Was there a lot of that stuff happening?
Yeah, we were sort of the nerds who were always jockeying for stuff like that. I mean, but at the time, I think Shannon was doing Charmed. So I think she was still in the Spelling family, I think, at that point. I'm almost positive. Michael, you directed a bunch of those, didn't you? Charmed? You didn't? Oh, okay. But I think it was just pretty clear, like, Brenda's not coming back,
Right.
Like,
yeah, I think when we
Brenda's
got
not
there,
coming back.
Yeah, by the time we got there, it was pretty known that even if we asked once or twice, I think the answer was consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, I love Shannon. Like, I think, and I love Brenda. Like,
exactly.
We actually got to work with Shannon on North Shore. And I think I love Shannon Doherty as an actress too. Like, she's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure that there was like a part of at least me who was like, oh, I want to pull those toys out and play with them. Yeah. But at the same time, like, we got to have Luke Perry back, like,
it's huge.
And that was massive. But I mean, I think I'm trying to remember, and I'm sure the podcast will get there at some point, the finale.
Hold. We'll get there.
Yeah, no, right. So
plenty of episodes left.
I'm thinking in my mind, like, those conversations would always still happen. The ones that you're asking about, that would always get floated. Like, I don't think there was ever a like definitive, like, this will not ever happen. I think that there was like, could it happen? Can it happen? Would it happen? How does everybody feel? Oh, it's the finale. So they were always, people were always talking about it, but Shannon was busy.
Yeah, and she's got a lot right now in her life. So for my podcast, watching this, let her deal with her stuff, please. I don't want to. Yeah, it's not a priority. I would love for her to. Yes, but
Yeah, no, she's great. She's a fantastic actor.
Was there a consideration to have Dylan and Valerie cross paths at all in this because of their history, or was it just not possible based on timing and all that stuff?
I think that the decision was made to have them cross in the night. Like, they just miss each other.
Yeah.
And I think that was also born out of like making sure that you, and Michael too, like, you would probably know better, but it was like, okay, we've got a very crowded stage. Let's get her out, because like, there's so much history between Dylan and Val that like, that would have required a scene that would just have taken you down a totally different path. So I think the idea was like, let's have a great moment between not only her and Kelly, but also between her and David, because they had a lot of stuff going down. And then let's make sure that the Luke entrance is its own thing, unadulterated.
Yeah. Michael, do you remember that? Was that a thought in your mind? Are they going to put Tiffany and Luke together, or were you kind of happier the way it played out?
I was happier the way it played out was great, because it was what Aaron just said. I mean, you want that to be the focus of the scene. Like, here's Luke. Whoa.
Yeah. I think as a super fan myself, this losing Jason Priestley on the show, Brandon, is so hard to stomach. I mean, he is the show, but getting Luke Perry back, I'm still there. I'm not, I'm all in. But Luke Perry is so good, and throughout the entire series, and to see him back with his friends is powerful. Yeah. You guys got to know, all three of you got to know Luke in a very personal way, and I know he could challenge the writers at times in previous years. What was Luke Perry like to work with? Aaron, we'll let you finish sort of your thoughts on on Luke Perry?
Mine, a complete dream. I don't. I mean, a dream. Like he was warm. He was he when he spoke to you, it was like you were the only person in the room, and I don't mean that in a manipulative way. It was a sincere way. He made the most incredible eye contact. He was tactile. Like he'd put his hand on your shoulder, or he'd when you were talking to him, he'd lean in close, and he just was like just a great guy. And I don't remember the ins and outs of why he came back. Like I don't really know how that was arranged. I don't know if it was like, oh, we're losing Jason, okay, let's top this. And I don't know how the negotiations worked or whatever. But the thing that was so cool was he could have come back and made everybody's life a living hell. He could have come back and been like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I'm not, and a lot of actors who've been on shows that long will often just be like, well, I wouldn't do that, because they have fused with the character.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They don't remember a world when there were two separate entities. And he didn't do that. He was, I remember him as being totally game all the time, ready to jump in. Maybe he would have some notes on dialogue, or maybe he would just like, at that point, he was maybe just like, he would maybe do a little bit of an improv, but I don't remember. I mean, John Eisendrath would probably be the best person to ask about, at the higher levels, but I seem to recall like he would call in occasionally, but I think even John, like, it'd be like, yeah, I spoke to Luke, we just want to maybe tweak this or tweak that, but it was nothing major,
right.
Nothing.
How about you, Gretchen?
I agree with that. And I think also what was my memory of Luke was that, in a lot of ways, Aaron and I since we were the new kids on the block, when he came back, he assumed his role back amongst that family in a really wonderful way. And he treated us always like a host, a mentor, he wanted to make sure we were always comfortable when we were on set. And he was never the type of person, also you would get sometimes on, never this show, but on other shows, when you've got a junior writer on set, it could be an actor or anybody will come and be like, I'm going to get in their ear because I want to I want to get an agenda back to the room or whatever. And it's sort of like, here's the weakling, here's the newbie, here's the whatever. But Luke was the opposite of that. I almost feel like he felt like it was his role as an elder statesman to make sure when we were there that we were learning as much as we could, that we were comfortable, that we were welcome, we were and he just had this warmth and this presence and an ease to him that it was so wonderful to be around. And so I feel really lucky that we got to work with him at that time. And as Aaron said, we've crossed paths many times, and he was always the same, which is just one of the most unique, genuine human beings I've ever met. And I feel very fortunate that we got to be part of like the Luke Perry story in a very small way. Very lucky.
Well, Michael, you worked with him in various stages of his career, and you were working on this with him when he came back. And you've shared your thoughts on Luke. What was he like here for you in this time period?
Everything they said, I would second that. And then I'm not a big discusser in TV. You don't have a lot of time to discuss scenes. Like, I studied theater in college, and the beauty of theater is you can just talk about a scene and try it so many different ways and really see what works, and then find things. And in TV, there's no time for that, especially in Aaron Spelling TV. But Luke would be like me. Like, I try to distill my notes into like one or two words that are just boom, impactful, get it across, have the actor take it in. And a lot of actors that I've worked with love to just discuss ad nauseum, and Luke was not that actor. He would do exactly the same thing. He was very smart, really analytical about his role, but not over analytical. So he would be able to distill a problem that he had into a very few words work it out quickly, and then either accept, no, this is how we have to do it, because, I mean, that's the other thing, is if ultimately we had to do it a certain way because that's how it was in the script, he would just take a deep breath and kill it. He would just do a great job, even though he disagreed with it, which is beautiful.
Yes.
Thing that I would like to say about him is that I have found that there is a inverse relationship between the talent of an actor and the personality of the person. Usually the more talented an actor, the more aggravating person they are in real life. And Luke did not fall. He was incredibly talented and an incredibly great human being. And that is, he might be the only one.
That's awesome.
And he had,
the most impactful thing, that's the thing that I would go to first about my working with Luke is that he was both amazingly talented and an amazing human being.
he was so grateful and thankful because he had left and had done some successful features,
Yeah.
you know, and had some great roles. He did a movie with Ashley Judd that he was great in, and the bull riding one, but what was also nice was, you know, after 10 years on that show, and that cast was worked really hard. I mean, for as efficient as those days were, so like there were times when we would shoot 2 episodes simultaneously. That show, you know, the hiatus was really small. It was a different time just in terms of like you were either doing TV or features for actors. There wasn't as much crossover. But at that time in the run of the show, seasons 9 and 10, Tori was starting to do movies. She had some success at Sundance. You know, Jenny was doing stuff. Tiffany was leaving. Like there was also sort of a, and everyone was super professional, but there was sort of we've been doing this for 10 years. What's next? What's next? We've been doing this for 9 years. What's next? What's next? And, as everybody does, you want to try and do different things, and they've been doing this for a long time. And when they worked on that show, you know, like Jenny was Kelly Taylor for, you know, like 11 months out of the year. But the other thing that Luke brought to the party, and again, it wasn't like the show was in need of it, but he brought the perspective of like, we're still lucky to be doing this. Like, let's still be thankful, you know, like, yeah, maybe this is dumb, but who cares, you know, because he brought an appreciation. Again, he was kind of this like jolt of energy, and the cast, they responded in kind. I mean, I think they were all so happy that he was back as well. But there was he gave those 2 last seasons a nice jolt.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I want to ask you guys about another thing, another controversial thing that came up in the press. And I'm sure you guys saw this Jessica Alba story about there was a rule on set where there could be no eye contact with the actors. And I'm curious to get the 3 of your perspectives on this, because it's been a very bizarre story, you know. Aaron, have you ever heard anything like that with the actors? That there was some...
No. I hadn't. I mean, I don't know. Again, like at that time, there's no excuse to treat anybody poorly or ignore anybody. So I don't even know how. So it doesn't matter if Jessica Alba was an extra or if she had like 5 lines. Like everybody should be nice. I never experienced anything like that. There certainly wasn't a rule that was like that you can't. There were so many guest cast coming in and out of there all the time. I think it would really that would really get around. I think there'd be many more stories.
Yeah.
Michael, you as a director, had you ever heard that?
On 90210?
Yeah.
No. And in fact, here's a funny little, when we had a nanny, you know, when my kids were younger, and so I was shooting an episode, and the nanny she was Swedish and very huge fan of the show. So I brought her to the set, and she just stood there right next to me and was just like, I think it was Jason Priestley was in the scene. So she was like just staring at him so, you know, intently that he did finally come over to me, and he said, he was so nice about it. He just said, could I just talk to you for a second? He said, "Is there a way that you could ask her to maybe not be on the set for the next take?" He was so nice. Whereas other actors I've worked with would just walk off the set. I can't,
Right.
But he just took me aside, and I said, "Oh yeah, of course. I apologized and spoke to the nanny. I fired her, sent her back to Sweden."
Well, we're yeah.
I've had other sets where there were things like that, but not 90210. Everyone was great. And I think it comes from the top. Aaron Spelling was just a decent guy.
Yeah. How about you, Gretchen? Did you ever hear of that?
No, actually, I didn't even.
Story. Yeah.
I didn't even hear the Jessica Elba story, so I'm sorry. I'm like, what? I should really get online and read things. But as a matter of fact, my memory is, again, would be on set, and look, they were for a big chunk of their lives some of the most famous people on the planet and the most recognizable people on the planet, and they would go every day to this tiny little turned over warehouse stage and film a show in a bubble amongst the same 100 and something people every day. And then if they left their house, they were mobbed. And that's the truth. They were massive stars. So, and I'm a middle child, so I'm coming up with weird excuses for people. Maybe there was a day when they had a bad day and something, but I can't imagine anybody saying anything like that on set, because I feel like we'd be on set and they'd come over and say, "Hey, how you I've always felt very greeted, and if you were new, it was almost like there's a new person here. Let's go say hi." Right. And that was crew, and that was cast, that was anybody. So no, I never had that experience at all there at all.
We're hearing that over and over. All the guest stars have come out and said, it was an amazing experience. Not sure what happened with Jessica there. Maybe just the wrong person said the wrong thing and she misunderstood it for whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway, guys, I think we covered this episode. Really great. I love this season 9, and I love this episode. I thought you handled Luke Perry's return amazingly. What an awesome time to be a fan and see him come back to the show. I think it's something that everybody dreamed of, and you guys got that opportunity, and it was a home run all the way around from Michael, Gretchen, and Aaron. So, and thank you for spending your time here with me and chatting more. I'd love to do more of these with you guys, as you know. So we will dive more deeply into other things that you guys did with the series in those 2 seasons. So
thanks. Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thanks so much. Nice to see you, Michael.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, and such great work post 90210. I've just been following your careers with amazement and not surprised, because I remember even as baby writers, it was clear you were going to go that way.
Well, the feeling is super mutual. And one other thing just about the way that we did stuff at Spelling, and this tilts back to Michael. Aaron Spelling had fiefdoms in terms of how we operated, and it was a great way to do things in a lot of ways, because the writers were in charge of doing scripts, the production was over here, and the directors, we didn't have a writer on the set, so all of that direction is Michael's work. Nowadays, sometimes directors might be like, "Oh, I had a writer over my shoulder this entire time," but when you handed off the script, it was basically the director. That's the director's movie, and so it was great, because it really taught us that you don't have to be there looking over the shoulder. You hire good directors, and then you let them do their thing, and they did the cuts, and then it was just a lot. It was a really efficient way to do things, and it was a really fun way to watch different directors work. And so the fact that you like that episode, it's very much about what Michael brought to it, because those directors, you guys were on your own.
And and Michael brings a bounce. You just do, Michael. You are a fun person, and there is an energy and a bounce to your work, and when we worked with you again on Roswell, and so we're a fan, and we continue to be a fan, and so let's work together again. That'd be great.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much.